Okay, here's the plan. March 18th, 1990, the day after St. Patrick's Day. Disguise. We use the uniforms again. Misdirection. At 12:44, we trip the broken glass and fire alarm. Control. At 1:20, we drive up to the museum and inform them that we are there to check the disturbance. Theft. The Dutch room is first. Rembrandt, Vermeer, and de Graaf. Then we look for the banner and the goo. Lastly, the blue room for the Manet. Stop off for the CCTV tape and the printout from the motion detectors. And we're out. The first attempt to rob the Isabella Gardner Museum in Boston is made on January 15, 1990, in the early morning hours of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Two men posing as police officers knock on the door and ask to be let in. The guard refuses and goes to call his superior, and the men leave. Abath is a security guard for the museum, and he is scheduled to work the shift through the night on the 17th of March. Mulvey is also scheduled but calls in sick, so Randy Hestad works the shift. The alarm goes off at 12:44 a.m., and Abath goes to the fuse box and shuts the alarm down. Abath opens the side door and shuts it again while on his rounds. Two men are outside in a car dressed in uniforms. At 1:20 p.m., the car drives up to the museum, and the two men get out and ask to come in to investigate the disturbance. They are let in by Abath. They tell Abath they have a warrant for his arrest, and they cuff him. Heston returns and is cuffed as well. Both are secured further and put into separate rooms in the basement. At 1:35 a.m., the thieves leave the guards. At 1:48 a.m., the first footsteps are picked up in the Dutch room by the security system on the second floor. The thieves break the glass of a lady and gentleman in black and the storm on the Sea of Galilee. They leave the large self-portrait of Rembrandt and instead grab a smaller portrait. Then they take the concert by Vermeer, they take landscape of an obelisk, a Flink painting that had originally been attributed to Rembrandt but had been unattributed for several decades. Then they steal a Chinese vase called a goo. They attempt to take a Napoleonic banner but are unable to. Instead, they take 5 de Graaf sketches and a gold-plated eagle called a finial. The final painting stolen is Manet's Ches Tortini, but the security system picks up no movement from the blue room where it lay on a table. At 2:40 a.m., the front doors are opened, and again at 2:45 a.m., as the thieves exit. In the morning, the two security guard replacements show up at the museum and become alerted when they are not let inside. They call Larry O'Brien, the deputy director of security, and he opens the museum doors. He spots a coat hanger that was used to steal candy from a machine and the frame that the Ches Tortini normally resides in. He contacts the police.
A part of our heritage has been stolen from us. It's a barbaric act. But of course, when I look at this frame, which is where the Vermeer was, I think that gives me the most sorrow. Yes, the concert.
The concert
by Vermeer, and I think that picture, more than any of the others, I still feel very intensely the loss of. It was popped out of the frame, so it was not, and I hope it wasn't rolled.
This is Anne Hawley. She was the executive director of the Massachusetts Council on the Arts and Humanities for a decade before taking the position of director at the Isabella Gardner Museum only 6 months before the heist took place.
I only lived 10 minutes away, so I just hopped into my car and drove in, not knowing what I was going to confront. I think from that moment, probably for several months, was just in a state of shock. We had bomb threats to the museum, and then personally, there were several of us that had threats against us, and so I was told to go a different way every time I left the museum. I just hope they're keeping it safe and at a temperature of 65 and humidity of 50%, because that's what they need.
James Whitey Bulger, a notorious mob boss in Boston, is investigated by the FBI, and Anne Hawley, the director of the museum, even asked his brother, William, a politician, to ask him if he was involved in the theft. Bulger denies having any involvement. In 1994, Anne Hawley receives a letter from a person wanting to negotiate the return of the art. They know inside information of the crime, specifically that the uniforms used in the heist were security guard uniforms that the thieves used to pose as police officers. They ask for the Boston Globe to print a 1 in the currency section next to the Italian Libra. The 1 is inserted, and Hawley receives another letter saying that the attempt by the FBI to determine the writer's identity has stopped the negotiation. Hawley contacts the FBI and finds out they had attempted to find the identity of the writer behind her back. Mid-August 1997, reporter Tom Mashberg is taken by William Youngworth, a friend of famous art thief Miles J. Connor Jr., to a warehouse in Brooklyn and showed a painting of the seascape by Rembrandt. Youngworth manages to get a $10,000 loan from the Gardner Museum to aid getting the other paintings, but the loan is never repaid, and the painting is now believed to have been a replica, even by Mashberg.
I was incarcerated in the Federal Correctional Institution in Memphis, Tennessee.
So you did not do it?
No, I didn't.
You saw it before it was stolen?
Sure, in the museum.
Have you seen it since?
Have I seen it since? Why, of course not.
So the art ended up with Joe Murray?
At one time, Joe was in control of it.
What happened?
Joe died. He was killed, and he didn't control anything after that. Everybody was looking for it. And I don't mean the police. And somebody was just extremely clever and quiet and was sitting on it for a number of years until things cooled off, and then would try to market it. But
Is that somebody you?
no, of course not. Wasn't me.
Youngworth also claims that the robbery was done by 5 men. 2 were identified as Bobby Donati and David Houghton, both of whom were deceased by 1997. Bobby Donati is carrying uniforms in a bag into a bar called The Shack shortly before the robbery. He's accosted by his friend, who rips the bag open, and when the uniforms fall out, playfully tases Donati. Donati is with his friend, Robert Garente.
No, actually, I was just coming back to Boston from Martha's Vineyard, and that crew that they suspect that actually did the robbery I really didn't hook up with them till about 94. And I was sitting on the in the living room with Bobby Garenti, and he says, I know where the yacht is. It's buried in a cellar in Florida. He said, do you have anybody that could fence it? Can we get rid of it? I said, I don't know, where to get rid of the yacht. I'm not a fence, and so from that point on, the subject was dropped, and I never spoke to him again about it.
Mrs. Guarenti, after he died, went to the FBI and said she witnessed her husband handing you a painting at a hotel in Maine. What is your response to that?
Out and out lie. She was crazy. She's bipolar. Bipolar she is. She's nuts. I know she was nuts.
Gentile fails several polygraph tests and is arrested when he tries to sell painkillers during an FBI sting. The FBI search his house and also his shed, which contains a false floor, and inside, nothing is found. In Gentile's house is a list of the missing art and their approximate black market value. Gentile claims the polygraph is rigged, and the drug arrest is just the FBI squeezing him for information. The reporter Stephen Kurkjian reports that the list is from several shady lawyers who approached Gentile, believing he could facilitate the sale of the paintings from Guarenti, and that it was these lawyers who made the list. The deal fell through when Guarenti sent a picture to the lawyers of the paintings taken from a book about art. Guarenti's widow gets $1,000 for her information on the case.
Mobster who police believe was involved in the Isabella Gardner Museum heist has died. An attorney for Robert Gentile confirms he died Friday at his home in Connecticut after having a stroke.
In 2005, Hawley hires a British private investigator, Rogzinski. Rogzinski finds a possible informant named Nichols, who he forces to fly to Florida, where Nichols claims the artwork is. Once in Florida, the informant gives excuses for several more days before Rogzinski forces an encounter with the man Nichols claims has the artwork. When Rogzinski accosts the surprised man, Martinier, the man flees into a back room and calls the police. Rogzinski is paid $150,000 for 18 months of work attempting to recover the stolen artwork. The Isabella Gardner Museum is seriously underfunded before the robbery. In fact, a security study for the museum finds that it lacks even basic security. The security station at the front is improperly set up without a separate adjacent guard room, and there is only one call button for the police. The museum also lacks climate control, and there is no insurance policy for the art. The guards are being paid minimum wage.
Cops rang the doorbell. They said, Boston police, we got a report of a disturbance on the premises. So I buzzed them in. The cop that was dealing with me turned to me and said, don't I know you? Don't I recognize you? I think there's a warrant out for your arrest. Can you step out from behind the desk?
Rick Abath, the security guard who let the thieves inside the museum, has a New Year's Eve party in the basement of the museum where he plays with his band and does large amounts of recreational drugs.
So you'd hold these, hootenannies down there?
At least once a month. Roughly, yeah, $5 a head.
The night of the theft, he opens the side door, a practice he claims that he does regularly to check if it is locked, though this has not been substantiated. The night after the theft, he leaves the Boston area and goes to a music festival, returning the next day.
Really? I seem to be the only one who's not trying to figure it out. And that mainly comes down to, I'm glad to be alive.
Do you have a feeling of shame as to what happened to this, that you feel personally responsible for what happened here?
No. I mean, I feel bad about what happened, obviously. Right. But, no.
So you go to the blue, you do your regular tour through the blue room, and that's the last footstep they say is seen in the blue room.
Exactly. Yeah. They wanted to know how it would be possible for the thieves to get that painting out of that room. And I said, I didn't know. And so they put forth the theory that, well, I perhaps took the Manet on my round and stashed it somewhere.
And you tell them what?
That I absolutely did not.
But you have to acknowledge the suspiciousness.
Oh, yeah, I totally get it.
The other guard on duty the night of the heist, the one we're only calling by his first name, Randy, says security at the Gardner Museum was lax.
I do remember somebody ordered a pizza or some kind of food delivery, and they just buzzed them right in when they came to the side door. And it looked like that kind of thing was done there all the time by night guards.
No evidence has been reported that links Abath with the crime, other than the strange circumstances of the robbery. The scope of the investigation into the heist at the Isabella Gardner Museum is very long and extensive because of the trouble identifying the actual thieves. Every lead has met a dead end, and the art is still unaccounted for. The theft of 81 minutes in the Isabella Gardner Museum has now been unsolved for 33 years.
And we've had investigation that has gone into Europe, Ireland, the United Kingdom, Japan, Asia. There's been no part of this globe that we haven't scoured, following up on credible leads. There's been a significant development in the investigation over the last couple of years, to the point where we can say with a high degree of certainty that we believe we've identified the individuals who were responsible for the original theft. And in fact, we've been able to trace some of the paintings, their whereabouts, in the years following the theft. And unfortunately, we haven't identified where they are right now, and that's why we're coming to the public for their help. After 22 years, we acknowledge the fact that any or all of these pieces could be in the hands of individuals who had nothing to do with the original theft or may not even know that they're stolen. So given that fact, we understand that someone who comes forward with information about the whereabouts of this artwork or with any of the pieces themselves is not necessarily involved in the theft and is not necessarily engaged in illegal activity.
Two thieves disguised themselves as police officers and used that ruse to get into the building during off hours in the middle of the night. Once they were in, it was a fait accompli. And there was nothing that was going to stop them. There were no further barriers between them in our paintings and a quick getaway. However, they didn't make a quick getaway. They spent 81 minutes in the museum, which is an inordinately long time for a theft of anything, never mind art. What we don't know is when they went into the blue room to take Chez Tortoni. That could have been the first room they entered, we don't know, because no motion sensors on the first floor went off that night. So it's difficult to say when that was taken.
Handcuffed them and duct taped their eyes and duct taped the handcuffs.
Right.
Took them down these stairs, one by one.
Just two of them. Right. It was all the guards in the place then.
Each thief with one guard, which again speaks to some inside knowledge, knowing there were only two working.
Two would be enough.
Because only two cops came, fake cops. And his handcuffs are with a second pair handcuffed to this post right
So he's just handcuffed to the post of this old sink right around the corner of the base of the stairs in the basement.
Exactly.
And he's duct tape around his eyes, his head.
Yes.
And duct tape around the handcuffs, and he's handcuffed to this lead pipe brace for the sink.
Right, and then his ankles are handcuffed. Duct tape.
Just as good.
So he's seated here, and this one's interesting because this is the guard who was not at the desk. This is the one who was called downstairs.
Right.
He's seated here, and the thief who took him here, and the interesting thing to me is that he was very polite to him and kind in some respects. He apologized to him a number of times.
What does that tell you?
Perhaps he was new to the game. He wasn't an experienced criminal. He said over and over, "Sorry, we have to do this to you." Maybe he even worked in the same type of field. He might have felt some type of affinity or kinship with the guy.
Maybe a rookie.
Probably a rookie. He was a younger guy. He didn't speak much until he started apologizing. In fact, When he handcuffed this person at first, he asked him if the cuffs were too tight. The guard said yes, and he redid them.
Wow.
Which is amazing. And he kept saying, get comfortable, you're going to be here all night. We're sorry, we're not going to hurt you.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, we do have information that we've gathered over the years about certain people that we have great interest in having bragged, but not as much, or not to the extent where we're able to pinpoint where we can find the paintings right now. So we've said in the past, and I've said in the show, that we have a good idea who did this. We believe that we know who perpetrated the heist, but getting from point A, knowing who pulled it off, to point B, where are the paintings today, is the rub here.
Can you imagine what it would be like to walk into those rooms and not see empty frames, but to see the paintings there?
I used to be able to at the beginning because I was naive and thought, maybe we could do this quickly. It's harder as time goes by, to be totally honest with you. I mean, I still have absolute faith we'll get them back. I do totally believe they're going to be there again. We'll get the paintings back. And I'm dying for that moment.
Well, in the beginning, I thought that what I would do, particularly in the first year when it felt dangerous and it felt so frightening and it felt so difficult, I thought that I would stay long enough to get things on track. But of course, then I fell in love with the collections and with the people and with the work.
Have there been moments over the 25 years where you thought that they were coming back?
Oh yes, particularly there were a number of leads where it looked like we were so close. I feel like probably 3 times I thought we were there and then we weren't.
How do you come back from that?
Well, I'll tell you, I no longer let myself get my hopes up on a lead because of that. I'm not going to be there until I see them.